Hare Krishna. Good evening, good morning, wherever you are in the world. This is perhaps the first in a series of conversations about leadership and Krishna consciousness and so on. I'm delighted to welcome Akrura Prabhu. He's an old friend who works in the field of leadership development in the society. Maybe you can say a few words to introduce yourself, Prabhu.
Thank you very much for this kind introduction, Damodar Prabhu. My name is Akrura Das, and I was born in Serbia, but I also have British citizenship, and I have been serving in England for 10 years. And I have published a leadership excellence newsletter for ISKCON leaders and managers for a few years. And I have published 78 issues, and they are now included in the database. So I had an opportunity to support and coach many leaders, and I myself had for some time, I would say, smaller managerial position and service in former Yugoslavia. But then later I worked with temple presidents and leaders whom I helped. And then in London, I also worked with the temple president of ISKCON London or ISKCON Soho for several years. Actually, two presidents were while I was there. And we worked to develop the management in the temple and leadership and to develop a manual. And we just try to apply many Srila Prabhupada's leadership principles, but we also used some professional knowledge. So I also had the opportunity to coach people who are much senior than me and to assist them in their service. And I coached about 1,000 devotees over 20 years.
Wow.
ISKCON devotees, and many of them were actually had some kind of a responsible position, leader or a preacher or a project leader or a temple president or a GBC or a guru or a sannyasi. And I just, I feel grateful for that opportunity. So, so this is something about me.
Yeah, thank you. Well, this was your brainchild, this idea that we should have these conversations. And I think you have a lot of contacts that you'd like to make these things available. We have a shared interest in looking at the role that, let's call them professional skills, have in helping devotees execute their services as leaders of the temple. So my background, I'm lucky my mum's a devotee, my uncle's a devotee. I was visiting the temple from the age of 8. I joined at 17 in 1984, Bhaktivedanta Mana, and lived a few years as a brahmachari. I'm initiated by His Holiness Bhakti Swami. For about 6 years, I was doing temple leadership. 3 different temples: Belfast, Central London, Soho Street, and Bhaktivedanta Mana. And it was around that time I became very interested. In fact, in my first leadership role, the actual day-to-day running of the temple wasn't difficult, but I noticed that the devotees were looking for something a little more from me than I knew what to do. They were expecting more consultation. They were expecting, that their ideas would also be taken on board. And I didn't really have that concept at the time. And the devotees I was working there started to introduce me to various ideas. One of the former temple presidents his father had been a management consultant. So he introduced some ideas. And then later, His Holiness Sridhar Swami, Naveen Krishna Prabhu introduced me to lots of other ideas. And from about 1995 onwards, I've been working, as a professional in the field. I decided at a certain point to take care of my livelihood. I would need a proper job. The ISKCON stipend was probably not really right. I even felt a little guilty taking a salary from the society. And so I've worked for something like now 27 years in management development, leadership development, including organizations like Franklin Covey, Stephen Covey's organization, PricewaterhouseCoopers, and so on. So let's talk a little bit about the role of organizations. Like, I think Srila Prabhupada established an organization, just like his spiritual master before him, as a vehicle to execute the mission of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Some devotees are just naturally very wary of organizations, and of course we sometimes hear references like Srila Bhaktisiddhanta suggesting that the organized church is the end of, vitality of religion, and yet he formed Gaudiya Math. So I think both Srila Prabhupada, Srila Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta were very well aware of the potential problems when you have an organization. But in the spirit of Yukta Vairagya, it's a mechanism, it's a vehicle. Prabhupada even called it his body to go about the execution of the mission, to systematically take Krishna consciousness to the masses. And of course, under their guidance, Gaudiya Math was hugely successful in India. 60 temples, steamships, daily, newspapers, and so on. ISKCON, as we know, has 400 or so temples around the world, and I think we've lost count of the number of members and so on. So Lord Chaitanya's movement is well and truly thriving through these vehicles. But like any vehicle, we were talking earlier, a vehicle needs maintenance. If you just run the vehicle and you don't know how to look after the vehicle, then at some point it's prone to problems. Organizations are not immune just because they're doing spiritual work to various problems, like physical bodies are not immune to disease or old age if we don't maintain them properly. So our view is that, there's lots of information about how organizations best run. And I know when I moved into that field, I intentionally thought, let me go and learn some things that I can bring back for the service of Prabhupada's mission. So let's get your thoughts on this. We were talking earlier today about, I think you posted a nice reference. I think it's uploaded now onto Virtual Istagosti if anyone wants to see it. Prabhupada said, if someone's a sincere devotee, then those kind of skills are automatically manifest. And so we were debating a little bit. Do you actually have to learn professional skills, or is it enough to be a sincere devotee? I'd love your thoughts. You've seen my thoughts. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, first, I would like to thank you for the training you have provided for Krishna Dharma Prabhu and myself. You have provided very expensive training for free. For free to us. It's a Train the Trainer 7 Habits training for leaders and people in general, and it's like 7 hours a day. So it was a wonderful experience. I will never forget it. So you have already brought to ISKCON, and also actually, thanks to you, I have been engaged and employed by ISKCON London, because Mahadyuti Prabhu, now he is Maharaj, he knew that I was into 7 habits and I was publishing this newsletter, and this was one of the main reasons why he employed me, and I didn't have to work with people outside. I could work in ISKCON and also support my family in England. But this is connected to what you have been offering to the leaders, like 7 habits training, and I have met a good number of leaders who have passed that training with you. And of course, Sridhar Swami introduced us to the 7 habits of highly effective people, and for me it opened the whole world of appreciation for what we can learn from people outside. And then I have found Srila Prabhupada's quote in one conversation. He said, we learn from everywhere. we learn from everywhere. We are not like sectarian fanatics. We can learn from anywhere. So, and then I saw, wow, we can learn so much from these people, especially how to apply the high Shastric principles in everyday life. And one simple example is how to build trust. So we learned from these people uh, in detail how to build trust. Srila Prabhupada said we should act according to love and trust principle, but I didn't exactly know how to gain trust or even how to be a trustworthy person. I mean, one thing is to be a good example. This I understand, but there is many other aspects of how to build trust. And I was so grateful to Stephen Covey and other authors who are teaching about how to build trust, or if it's lost, how to restore it. So Krishna's knowledge is everywhere, and what is common sense, we should be able to recognize and apply, and in this way also engage other people. Like I heard one Swami criticizing Stephen Covey in his class, but what I was trying to do with professionals, I tried to meet them, give them prasadam, and thank them for their books and for their knowledge. And in this way, they also get a connection with Krishna. But also in this way, through us, they can do service for Krishna.
Yeah.
Some.
No, that's nice, Prabhu. And look, we have no issues using a computer, using a car. We call it Yukta Vairagya. But somehow we become a little more nervous when it's an idea, when it's a concept. Maybe some devotees think it's a deviation to take any ideas, especially if it's got something to do with how you treat others or how you administer Krishna's, property or whatever. Anything that's just not coming in the Vedas. But of course, the Vedas doesn't really give a manual how to run an organization. In fact, up until the industrial age, there really weren't big organizations. There were little businesses. Maybe the biggest organization was an army. And of course, a lot of people still have a very militaristic idea of an organization, which is actually quite problematic. We see, for instance, some of the quotes we were throwing around. Srila Prabhupada had a very empowering style, releasing people to be entrepreneurial rather than heavily controlling. And that's so different than, the militaristic model which characterized the early industrial age and so on. So Yukta Vairagya, it's there's a famous conversation that we cited earlier in our conversation today, where I believe in Srila Prabhupada's final months, he woke Giriraj Maharaj in the middle of the night and said, "How will this movement go on after I'm gone?" And Giriraj Maharaj offered various things: purity, sincerity, organization, and intelligence. So that's very interesting. That seems to contradict the quote that we're looking at earlier today, where sincerity looks like it's enough. And certainly I would say I've seen many, many sincere devotees in leadership roles who maybe lack core skills, and their advancement in Krishna consciousness hasn't necessarily bestowed, hard competencies. Let's say managing finances properly, or conducting a disciplinary conversation. Someone's misbehaved. How do you have that conversation effectively? Or building a strategy, just basic things. So let's have a look. I mean, you mentioned Stephen Covey earlier. I was introduced to Stephen Covey by His Holiness Sridhar Maharaj. And I think he had shown an interest in lots of different ideas. He was quite a futuristic and forward-thinking devotee. And he kind of sourced this as something that was super compatible with Krishna consciousness. And I'll just ask anyone who does watch this to test this out for themselves. Like, I'm going to share a few of the models that I found at Covey that I found especially relevant and useful. And let's see ourselves, are these, mundane concepts that have no place, they are incompatible with Krishna consciousness, or are they just nice, enablers of the things that we want to do in Krishna consciousness. I'm going to share something on the screen. Give me a second. Oh, let me try and find this. I think I had some slides open earlier. Sorry, I thought I'd got all this set up, but it's proving a little... My expertise is not what I thought it was. Here we go. So this is a slideshow. Has that come up? Can you see that?
Yes.
Okay, so this is something called the organizational effectiveness cycle. In 1995, I went on a Covey program called 4 Roles of Leadership. And this is one of the frameworks there. At the time I was temple president of Bhaktivedanta Manor, I found this extraordinarily helpful to help make sense of the complexity of an ISKCON project of the scale of Bhaktivedanta Manor. So I'll start by looking at these client and other stakeholder needs. So this is it's called the organizational effectiveness cycle. You can use it with any organization of any kind. And you could say in a regular commercial organization, your key stakeholder, the person upon whom the success of your business depends, is typically a customer, a client. If the customer isn't happy with what you're offering, they're not going to pay money, you don't have a business. So keeping the customer happy, understanding what the customer is looking for, giving the customer the experience that they expect, value for money, meeting their needs. This means you have a customer who will do business with you and possibly do repeat business with you, and your business can thrive. The other big stakeholder, the other critical group of people upon whom the success of a business depends are the staff. If the staff are happy and ready to work hard and do nice things to please the customer, serve the customer, then that leads to customer being happy and so on. If the staff are upset and they're leaving, or they're giving poor service, or they're incompetent, miserable, then your business doesn't succeed. Now, ISKCON's a much more complex organization than a commercial enterprise. And if we think about all the different people that our organization tries to serve and all the people upon whom its success depends, we could say there are the temple leaders, the temple managers, there are the temple residents, there are the congregational members that visit. Amongst them, there are donors, there are families, there are people who used to live in the temple, have skills, maybe have an appetite to offer things to the temple and wish to be involved. There are the children of those devotees. You could dissect our different constituents in many different ways. All of these different people have expectations and have needs, and if those needs are understood and addressed, then they're happy, they're engaged, they contribute. If they're disillusioned, if they're disaffected, if they don't feel valued, if their needs aren't met, maybe they go somewhere else to get their needs met. We can see lots of people who at one time committed themselves to the society, at some point felt they couldn't believe in the society anymore, and then they lessened their commitment. They sit on the sidelines, they're disengaged, they're unhappy. Maybe they're even detractors because their expectations were thwarted, not met. Now, I'm not saying that we should all be consumers, but this is a leadership model that basically says that leaders should take a great interest in the needs and expectations of all the different stakeholders of that organization, because if they can nicely attend to those stakeholder needs, or to use the other phrase here, if the results that the organization produces match the stakeholder needs, then all of those stakeholders are happy, and the donors are happy and they give. All the devotees are happy and they come and they participate and they engage. The temple residents are happy. The children are happy. And if we miss these things, then we end up with a lot of disgruntled people, and maybe only a fraction of the people who could be participating and contributing do so. So this is one assessment of organizational health. How well are we addressing the expectations and needs of all the core people inside the organization, all the people the organization is designed to serve? So another input here. The results that are produced are a direct result of the behaviors, the activities, and the culture of the organization. So, for instance, if one of the stakeholder needs is, if I'm a guest, I want to feel that I'm greeted and someone can share a bit of information with me, and Prabhupada would have an expectation they would receive a nice plate of prasadam. Maybe they'll learn something nicely articulated about Krishna consciousness. I have a rewarding experience. Maybe I'll come back. But if the results are different than that, if there's no one there to greet me, if it's something I can't understand and the class is above my head and people aren't particularly friendly and it doesn't feel like I'm not sure if I fit in this environment, then that's a direct reflection of a poor behavior. Something about the way in which the culture is working right now is failing to deliver results that meet that stakeholder expectation. So you can see that this is a systemic model explaining cause and effect. The culture is often a product of the systems and processes. So this is the box next to it, or what's the decision making like? Does it infuse people with faith? Is the structure such that it empowers people to, for instance, is there even an appointed person to greet the guests? Or is that not even a thought process that anyone went through? Has someone been trained to know how to give the guest a great experience? Are they incentivized to do it? I'm not saying that has to be monetary incentive. There's lots of different ways you could think about rewards. Do we even collect any information about the guest experience? Oops, I'm starting to reveal some other extra information here. So the systems and the structure and processes are a reflection of a strategic plan. How have I organized everything so that the right experience is going to be delivered? Do I have a vision for the kind of experience I want people to have when they come? Or do I just do activities without any real plan? And you could say that the vision and the strategy are products of the mission. We might say the 7 purposes of ISKCON or something. So this is a systematic a systemic model, looking at all the different elements that create vitality in an organization. When they all work well, people have a great experience, the organization thrives. When something in them is broken or not working optimally, ultimately someone somewhere has a problematic experience. So then Stephen Covey lays on, what does a leader do then? So in the heart of the framework, the most critical component of leadership, you mentioned it earlier, building trust and credibility. The role in Covey language is modeling. For instance, when Prabhupada was at the helm of the organization, he had such credibility, such spiritual stature. Everybody trusted him. They trusted his motives. They trusted his capability. They trusted his intentions. And that meant that everything would go on nicely. When the leader has that kind of trust, if trust gets compromised, then it actually starts to, mess with everything here. It affects the culture. Even if you have systems, people find ways around the systems because they don't trust that the systems are working or been properly designed. People don't trust that what you say the mission is or the vision is actually really what's going on. So trust is central. The next big capability is building a strategy, not just building it, but actually instilling it in people's hearts and minds. When Prabhupada talked about the vision for the movement, it excited everybody. Everybody got really caught up in that. It still excites people today. But I would say if you went around the society today to try and understand, how well defined is the strategic direction? Is it living and breathing in the hearts and minds of everybody in the organization? I'd say there's probably confusion or cynicism about that to a large extent, because the pathfinding skill is actually not really manifest. We won't talk a huge amount about this, but obviously how you design the organization is another leadership capability. And another one we're talking about today is, how do you create conditions in which the people really feel deeply committed and want to carry out the activities of the mission? So this is called empowering. To trust, you were talking about earlier. Here is an interesting framework. Hopefully it's come up. This is from an interesting thinker called David Maister. It's called the trust equation, and it suggests that trustworthiness and credibility is actually a function of these things. Are you reliable? Do you say what you're going to do, or do you make promises that you don't keep? Are you credible? Are you a spiritually elevated person that we could say, yes, you're a credible, saintly person? Do I believe when you speak that you're actually doing the things that you talk about? Like I say, Prabhupada exuded this extraordinarily. Intimacy, you know, do you spend time with me? Do I feel like I'm important to you? And self-orientation, do I feel like you're selflessly serving, or are you just running your own agenda here? People, you know, subtly, perhaps even subconsciously, have an antenna for these things, and they either do trust a leader or they don't. And as we said, if the trust is compromised, almost nothing else works. This is why competence is actually such an important thing. If leaders are making incompetent decisions too often, it compromises their trustworthiness. If their intentions are in doubt, it compromises their trustworthiness. This is a big deficit in the society at the moment. And this is why there's these massive campaigns, for instance, around child protection, because the leaders are not seen as making credible moral decisions and so on. I'll pause because I've said a lot there, and you may have some questions or things that you would like to chip in as well.
So now someone may ask, how is this related to the scriptures? Why do we need all these structures?
Well, if we think about, you know, when the scriptures talk about going to somebody who is fit to give spiritual guidance and to follow their directions and so on. So you could say spiritual leadership, or even being a guru. Tasmad gurum prapadeta jigyaso shreya uttamam shabde parichanishnatam brahmani upashramashrayam. So this directly talks to some elements of trustworthiness. Shabde parichanishnatam, do they actually know the scriptures? And are they capable of even resolving your questions? Which, of course, is one way of instilling faith. You could argue that trust and Shraddha are very, very closely related, and Shraddha is the foundation on which all the other aspects of Krishna consciousness are built. So I think there's a big correlation between trust and faith, trust and Shraddha. Brahmani upashramashrayam, is this somebody who is on the spiritual platform, which we could say devoid of ulterior motives, the self-orientation that's mentioned here? Actually, you could see by the way the equation works, if the orientation, if the sense of the person's agenda is questionable, then everything about that person is in doubt. I'm not sure I trust the person. I'm not sure. And this is a big challenge. You know, you could say so many devotees have left the Krishna consciousness movement and perhaps gone to other sanghas because they've been unimpressed with the spiritual leadership available. But sometimes it's also just bad decisions. And I think a lot of devotees don't discriminate. You know, let's say a bad decision is made, an unpopular GBC policy that they feel wasn't really thought through. Maybe it was how we're going to relate to another sangha, or maybe it's you need to be reinitiated, or we've put this person up as a guru, or even banning chocolate, whatever it may be. If people feel like this was a misguided decision. Maybe they'll go, you people are badly motivated. But it actually may simply be they don't have a good decision-making framework. They don't factor in all of the factors. They don't do their research. They don't involve the right people. They make, off-the-cuff decisions that are just badly thought through. So there is a saying out there, which is one of my favorites: never attribute to evil what could easily be explained by stupidity. So, is it that all the leaders are badly motivated? Well, there might be some who are. And certainly, I think if they're not attentive to this trust equation, there's a good chance they'll do things that people see as untrustworthy. But how much of it is just competence as opposed to ill motive? And, the devotees may not distinguish between the two. They'll just go, I don't feel like I trust this person. I don't know if that explains, if that satisfies you. You may have a different view.
So for a leader to be trustworthy, he needs to have both character and competence. If he has only one, it's not enough.
Yeah, I mean, that was the Covey sort of teaching. And the metaphor that was often given, if you're going to a doctor and the doctor says you need such and such an operation, you want to know that doctor's done that operation before, that he actually has the skills to carry that operation out. But you also want to know, is he just recommending this because he gets paid to do it? Or is it actually what I really need? And so I think, people often look with suspicion. Once trust is compromised, people almost look through the lens of suspicion at everything the leader does. And that's why, it's important for leaders to apologize if they make mistakes. It's important for leaders to listen to people. It's important for leaders to ensure that there's transparency. It's important for leaders to account for every dollar. There's so many different things that if a leader does, people go, this guy seems to be on the level. This guy seems to be well motivated. But if there's enough contraventions of those things, everybody becomes really, really wary. So anyway, that's my immediate thought. Shall we go on, or do you want to, mention some other things?
Yes, we can go on.
All right, so this is the same framework. This is just a simplified or a slightly prettier model. One of the things I feel is really important is for there to be, if we're going to come up with a useful strategy, you see this idea of pathfinding, because we've talked a little bit about the trust stuff in the middle. The strategy means I have a clear understanding of how to be relevant to the majority of people. It means I've decided which stakeholders I want to create great experiences for. What's the experience I want to give a donor? Well, what's the donor expect? Probably that is to do with things like accountability. Maybe ISKCON's doing a reasonable job of looking after donors. I mean, it's sort of, it switched its economic model from collections on the street, which was the strategy in the early days, to a donor model in most places. And of course, this means it's also aligned itself with the preferences and expectations of that donor community, which is largely, people who are part of the Indian diaspora. What do they want when they come to a temple? Well, they want to have a gorgeous darshan. We do that. We offer that. They want to have maybe kirtan, maybe nice pravachan, maybe some sadhu sangha, maybe some nice prasad. What we offer, so there's a word within the strategy world called value proposition. The value proposition to the Indian community absolutely ticks every box. The value proposition in the early days of the society for the young people who joined ISKCON and gave up everything and moved into the ashram and became young revolutionaries changing the world, Prabhupada perfectly pitched come and join a movement. Let's change the world together. Let's make the world Krishna consciousness. That no longer really ticks the boxes of people in general. It's one of the reasons Krishna West has grown up, because they're saying we no longer seem to be all that relevant and accessible and appealing to the average person in the West anymore. But I don't know that there's a huge amount of researching of needs and expectations that necessarily drives that. It feels a little anecdotal. But, let's think about all the devotees that used to live in the ashram. Exactly what is the offering to them? What do we guarantee a person will experience? Will they have a nice experience? Will they feel respected? Will they feel listened to? Will they have an opportunity to contribute according to their inclinations and talents? Or do they sort of feel left to one side, like they don't matter anymore? Maybe all the energy goes into the Indian community, the donors. Maybe all the energy goes into the residents who carry out the daily roster of volunteer work and so on. Even what is the expectation of somebody that moves into an ashram? Because that's not something that more and more people are taking up. It's actually a dwindling offering, it seems to be. So are we offering them an education? Are we offering them preparation for future, successful life in Krishna consciousness? Or do we just consume their labor for a few years? And then they have to figure out, once they get married, what do they do with their lives? And they've probably, given the best years of their educational time and productive life. Now they've got nothing on their CV. Are we okay with that? Or should we have a strategy to actually equip people for a full life? What about the kids of devotees? What exactly is the offering? My sense is we don't necessarily tailor messages all that well. I think we're better now than we were in the early days, where I don't think much thought was given at all, or some very strange, idealistic, fanatical kind of ideas were enacted. But, what do they expect? What do they hope for? What do they need? Do they feel cared for? Do they feel loved? Do they feel heard? There is a framework on the next page here. This is a famous motivational or needs framework. And it says, you can predict categories of needs that everybody has. Everybody has physiological needs. They need to survive. They need to breathe. They need to eat, and so on. Devotees in the temple have really minimized those to the bare minimum. Prabhupada will talk about keep body and soul together. As householders, people generally look to, some kind of secular income or livelihood. Maybe they run a business. Maybe they take some kind of employment to meet their physiological needs. Most people don't look to the society for physiological needs. However, there's often a big violation if there are salaried people who are meeting their livelihood requirements. And, people may go, well, how come that's happening for them? And I gave so many years and it was all volunteer work and I didn't get that. So that creates a lot of confusion for people. But most people, the ashram residents, of course, look to the temple to provide prasadam, a place to lie down, a room, but they live simply. Safety and security. I won't talk about that one so much. Belonging and love. This is a massive one. Do I feel cared for? Do I feel people are looking out for me? Do I feel like this is my tribe and these are my people? Does it feel like a wholesome culture? Or are we just simply argumentative, impersonal, and so on? Very predictable need. Almost every one of our stakeholders will have that need, and we should be measuring. Are we addressing that need effectively? If we're not, we should come up with a strategy that better attends to that. I think there are places, maybe it could be said that the Chowpatty Temple has a structure around, counselors to look after everybody. So that would be an example of a strategy that really deliberately looks at that need. Esteem, feeling important, feeling valued, feeling like I have a voice, that I matter. Do we take care of that? Again, most of our stakeholders would have that. Do we violate that and have people feeling like they don't matter and no one really cares what they think and whether they contribute, their time or what they did in the past or whatever? Cognitive needs, the need to learn. I think we probably do something okay on that front. Like, there's a Bhagavatam class. People are learning about Krishna consciousness, at least on the Krishna consciousness front. Aesthetic needs, maybe that's things like the beautiful architecture, the beautiful music, the deities, and so on. We probably can tick that box in many cases. Self-actualization, fulfilling my potential. You could argue that everything about Krishna consciousness is there, but do people feel like they're stagnating in their Krishna consciousness or that they're growing in their Krishna consciousness? That would be something, again. Organizations that really have strong strategies actually measure whether or not they're fulfilling these expectations and who feels this particularly strongly, and is it one of the main reasons people come or don't come anymore? This is what we want to know. And transcendence, the idea of am I doing something really worthwhile, something I believe in, something that's doing some good in the world and so on? Does it resonate with my deepest values? All of those things are kind of part of that. So I don't think I've built any more slides for today. Those are the main models that I really wanted to talk about. Maybe I'll just go back to the empowerment and culture model just for a second. Please jump in while I'm finding that slide. I feel like I'm doing a lot of the talking here and we're robbing people of your insights.
Well, I'm happy to listen to you and happy that devotees will listen. I want to say that once I asked you, can you recommend any good resource material or a book about asking effective questions? Because many of the professional tools are consisted of questions, of questionnaires and things like that. And then you recommended Mahan Khalsa's book, Let's Get Real or Let's Not Play. And you said that he is very good at asking questions. And I found in this book something that has become part of my personal mission statement. His phrase was helping clients succeed. And everything that you speak about here is, if you speak about the needs of people, it has to do with helping clients succeed, helping people succeed. And I just changed one word in this phrase to helping devotees succeed. And this had been my guide over the past 20 years, largely thanks to your recommendation. It had to actually never forget what is my service to devotees. And when I find myself frustrated, I ask myself, am I doing my mission? And usually the answer was no. So I would get back on track to see, have I helped any devotee succeed today? So now, recently I spoke to one devotee and asked him if he think it would be a good idea to develop a mission statement for the yatra and for the temple, and that involving people in developing it also can bring about more unity and more clarity and more inspiration for everyone. And then this devotee just quoted some verses from, I think, from the Gita, and he said, this is a mission statement. He wasn't against the whole thing, but somehow I felt he didn't recognize the value of this kind of work. And in ISKCON London, we actually did that kind of work, and applied some of the tools that we have learned from the professionals, like win-win agreement and job description or service description, and it helped enormously, actually, even to prevent conflict when it came about, and to have a clarity of expectations between the temple and the devotees who are engaged or employed by the temple. And we find, I mean, found these tools extremely helpful. For example, we also had a vision statement for London, and the vision statement didn't come from any of the temple devotees, even not from any of the prominent congregational devotees, but it came from someone who just is occasional visitor. So his proposal for the vision statement was London flooded with Krishna consciousness, and everybody liked that. And we just accepted it as our official vision statement for ISKCON London. And then when we developed mission statement, also we involved many devotees, and it helped to unite this community around the temple. So I'm just saying that professional tools that we can find in the professional resources can be very helpful to improve our service.
Yeah, I think you're touching on something extraordinarily profound, which is it's not just about having a vision, having a mission. It's about, is it a shared mission in the hearts and minds of everybody that's involved? So rather than it being, hey, I went to a dark room as a manager, I figured out what we should be doing, everybody get behind me. That's a very egocentric way of doing things. Whereas if it's done as a community activity together, what would we like to create here, you know, in London or in New Govardhan or whatever? What's the experience we'd like to create for these different groups of people? What is it you love about the place? And, you know, just that process of involving everybody, they all feel like they have a stake in creating something that they feel passionately committed. I'm not saying passion here meaning rajagun. I just mean it involves their deepest sense of inspiration, their you know, most finely held values and aspirations. If they feel like, wow, I could be a part of this. This is something I believe in. It's something I'm helping to create. This is something I want to commit to. That in itself could do wonders to re-engage people. Just that very act. I'll share with you, I'm very mindful we're only about 12 minutes before we'll finish today. One of the examples Covey talks about when he talks about shared vision is the Ritz-Carlton. Ritz-Carlton is a chain of hotels throughout the world, and they aim to provide like a 7-star experience for uber wealthy people. And their whole thing is, we don't just want to give the guests what they expect. We want to absolutely blow them away, delight them, even give them things they didn't ask for. And so they have this way of cascading the sense of mission to every team. So just to give an example, the lady that comes and refreshes the rooms, you know, she comes around to make the bed and change the flowers or whatever it is in the room. She noticed when she went into one of the rooms that someone had got these kind of pillows. They have different kinds of pillows, you know, different hardness, different softness. Oh, he's changed the ones that were on the bed and he's got these ones. I'm going to put that in the database. And next time he checks in another city, we know that that's his preference. He'll get those. That's how committed they are. If someone makes a mistake, they actually have a budget to fix it. You know, I spilt the hot chocolate. Okay, your hot chocolate was late. Okay, you can have a free breakfast. It's amazing how far they go. I'm probably not doing it justice, but the point is, everybody is involved in developing the mission as it applies to their role. This is what it means for reception. This is what it means for room service. This is what it means. And they care about it. They feel like this is what I'm committed to. I helped shape this offering. Can you imagine if we did that, where everybody kind of goes, well, what would we like the experience of working in the Pujari department to be like? What would we like the experience of, a visitor to be? Who's going to greet them, and what's the processes and the systems and the flavor of the experience? Have we trained everybody that comes into contact with the guest to give that kind of experience? If you get everybody's hearts and minds and spirits involved in vision, and which stakeholder needs are we going to meet and how are we going to meet them, you can revitalize an organization. You can literally put it on fire, as opposed to everybody's just doing their own thing, maybe scrabbling around to get their own needs met because they can't be confident anybody else is looking out for their needs. That's like a hellish situation. Sorry, I'm pausing in case you want to say anything. We have about 10 minutes left before we finish today's broadcast.
Actually, we can continue over time for 15 minutes.
Okay, we'll do 75 if we have 75 minutes of high value kind of stuff. So I like this idea of shared vision. And look, one of my dreams in the future is, right now I'm still, a wage slave working in the consulting field, but I do feel like I've picked up facilitation skills. Like you said, the ability to just know how to ask questions or even design community engagement sessions like we're talking about right now. I would love in the future to travel and create a one-day experience where we invite communities and we create a, what are we trying to do here? What would we like to offer? What would we like the experience to be? What do you love about the place? What needs to change about the place? And like you're saying, all you need to do is engineer. I mean, there used to be this process that Prabhupada introduced called Ishtagosti. That's exactly what it's meant to be like. Everybody's involved. Everybody feels a stake in things. Nowadays, if at all Ishtagostis happen, it's really like temple announcements. What does the temple management want to tell everybody, as opposed to a way of involving and engaging? I'll pause to see if you want to say anything.
Well, I was so impressed with Ritz-Carlton. They said their principle is uncompromised, personalized service.
Yeah.
And they will remember which juice you like, or as you said, which pillow you like, and you feel like a king. You feel so taken care of. And also, I think they have another motto: we are ladies and gentlemen serving ladies and gentlemen.
Correct.
So
that talks about how the staff treat each other.
Also, yeah, and shows high respect for the customers, for the clients, and also for each other, and that's beautiful. I mean, this is what we want also in our spiritual community. So we can learn so much from these people, just basic mode of goodness, or basic respect, or basic treatment of human beings, which sometimes we forget, and we think we are too transcendental. But I like to. There is so much literature about managing change. So if you can say something, okay, I had previous question. If you could have free hands to implement something in ISKCON that you believe will have the greatest impact and bring about the greatest positive change, what would that be?
Wow, that's such a powerful question. And you are definitely a master of questioning. Let me just do a little detour about questions because you spoke about them earlier. We're really good at talking, and I'm demonstrating that as well here. We've got so much to share with people, but actually the art of questions. Can you imagine, for example, if after chanting a round of japa, someone actually coached you about how attentive were you? And were there particular stimulus that meant you lost attention? Or even just at the end of the class, rather than, everyone poses questions of the expert on the Vyasasan. What if the expert on the Vyasasan is the one asking questions? What did you learn from today? How much more progress we might make. So look, I want to really acknowledge what a great question you asked. I honestly believe if we're going to start somewhere, it's largely what we've been talking about. You may remember we spoke a couple of weeks ago, or maybe a week ago. I think if we could institute an annual survey at each temple that asks these kind of questions. What do you look for when you come to the temple? What's important to you about your temple experience? What do you hope to get from ISKCON? These kind of questions. And how well does ISKCON address those expectations, those needs, those hopes? And you could break the responses around demographically. This is what the donors said, and this is what the family said, and this is what the kids said, and this is what the old Prabhupada disciples said, and this is what the initiated Brahmins said, and this is what women said. And you could actually have a real picture. Are we addressing everybody's needs? Are we missing some people? And then that could feed into a community strategy session. Okay, here's what the data's telling us. Here's where we're winning and succeeding. Here are the people that right now don't feel valued, or these are the people, people aren't rating the classes right now, or, guests really aren't having the kind of experience that we want them to have, or, there were quite a few comments about the cleanliness, or whatever it might be. The whole organization reviews that data and says, this is our temple. How do we want to collectively create the optimal experience? What is our sense of purpose? What is our vision for what this place will be like? What is it that we want to offer people? I honestly believe if you instituted those kind of community sessions with a little bit of that research to inform the strategy conversation, this would re-engage so many people. They would feel a sense of ownership again. Prabhupada said ownership turns sand into gold, as opposed to feeling disenfranchised. I don't have a voice. No one knows. No one wants to know what I think. Oh, it's missing the mark. And who do you even tell about it? And it looks like everybody's just happy that the donations are good. I think it could revitalize so many things. I mean, the other thing I feel is, building leadership competence. And I really feel there's a really important initiative about the GBC regaining credibility amongst the masses of devotees. So there's a few things that are in there. You mentioned change just now. I don't know if we want to talk about that at all. I'll let you speak. I'll let you either ask another question or provide an answer to your own question. What would you do if you could just do one thing?
I would bring in devotees like you who already have so much experience and expertise in community development and organizational development and leadership development. And then I would encourage people to help each other succeed. So that's why I created this spiritual partnership guide, like a manual that gives ideas how two people can help each other. So encourage people in the community to help each other in one-to-one setting. So that's one. I mean, there is many things that can be done. Now, I would like to ask you, I think famous Peter Drucker said that culture eats strategy for breakfast. So you speak about strategic sessions. First, community Ishtagoshti session, then then go to the strategy session. But could you explain this phrase? What does it mean that culture eats strategy for breakfast?
Yeah, it's a very profound statement, actually. What it means is you can see the order. So vision and strategy are almost a concept that you have. And more often than not, in many businesses, it is just some senior people that come up with a strategy. It's not a collective effort that involves all of the employees and so on. So they write a document. Maybe they even get some consultants in like Bain or McKinsey to write their strategy. You should play in this sector and you should divest yourself of this, part of the business and invest in that part of the business. And they have this idea, this is how our business is going to win. And because they don't know how to engage all the staff, they come up with, here is the customer experience that we want everyone to have. And they treat the staff like, rubbish. And the staff basically go, I don't care for this place. I don't care for this customer. So whatever they had this brilliant idea in the boardroom, the culture, the everyday reality on the ground for the person who's trying to manifest that strategy in day-to-day behavior, it completely gets undone. So that's what it means. And what we've described, these kind of community engagement sessions, that in itself is actually an attempt to build the culture. It is an attempt in itself to say, this is our strategy. These are our values. This is our organization. This is the experience we want to create. These are the results that we want, or the outcomes that we want to help produce. That in itself is actually doing work at the cultural level. So it's simultaneously doing a couple of these things. The other ingredient you can see in between vision and culture, or strategy and culture, are the systems. So let's say, I'll just give a mundane example. I'm thinking on my feet here, and then I'll see if I can come up with a devotee example. Let's say the bank says, we want to reduce red tape and make it easier for customers to get a loan. That's the strategy. That's how we'll compete with the other banks. But then they don't fix their systems. The system says you still have to fill out 25 forms and you have to produce this evidence. So the system gets in the way of the strategy, and the cultural experience is not one of freedom and empowerment. Let me think about an equivalent for our society. Yeah, so look, it might be where we say, we really want to create, one of Prabhupada's goals for the society, it's one of the 7 purposes, is to teach and encourage a simple and more natural way of life. And, one of the ways that Prabhupada put systems and structures around that is, let's have Varnashram, let's have suitable properties where we can have food production and we can have actual Vaishyas doing Vaishya things. And we can actually create a new economy that will, help the householders earn a living, without having to be wage slaves and Ugra karmis and this kind of stuff. Now, you could argue, I don't know if that's currently registering, because I'm not even sure what the current strategy is for the organization. I'm not sure there's a plan. I know we have a strategic planning team, but I haven't seen an output that says, here's what we're working on. This is what we're collectively doing. These are our goals. These are our, ways of achieving those goals and so on. I haven't seen anything. Maybe it exists and it's just, in a file on someone's computer somewhere, but it's not traveled down the organization for everybody to go, oh yeah, that's what we're trying to do. Okay. We could say that if Varnashram is an important part of the strategy, then it actually needs a structure. It needs a responsible person who's accountable for building that component of the plan, and should therefore be held accountable for whether or not we're achieving that part. Now, I know there is a devotee Kalakanta Prabhu, who runs cow protection and agriculture ministry and so on. So we could say now we actually do have one of the elements of, we've got a structural arrangement. And I know I do a little bit of service with him. He's someone who I see as a very credible leader, and I'd love to assist him in the bringing that about. But has it traveled all the way down the organization? Do we have training programs about how to carry out all of those activities? Do we have good information systems? Let me just go back to the slide that breaks out all of those systems. So you can see here, key processes, key decision making, a key structure, information, development or training or whatever, and rewards. Have we actually got that kind of infrastructure that's producing those kind of day-to-day activities and behaviors where we've got a thriving, farm? Or is it that the vast majority of devotees aren't really signed up to simple living, high thinking? They're signed up to living in the suburbs, having a regular job. They didn't really take on board that strategy. It's probably not a great example, but it's just me thinking on my feet in relation to your great question. So that's the point is, if the strategy doesn't have a clear plan and then doesn't have the right organizational framework, it won't even make it into the culture. And that's where organizational trustworthiness gets undone. People go, oh, you've been saying this stuff for years, but you're not really doing anything about it. So organizational trustworthiness gets compromised because there's no implementation of a stated or a professed goal.
So this seems to be one of the large issues in ISKCON, that, for example, if top leadership makes a resolution, it doesn't get implemented systematically and locally, but it's just something that is published, and then even some of the decision makers, GBC members, sometimes they just speak about or even ridicule decisions they have made together. So that really erodes trust of devotees. And I was always, several times I have written to ISKCON leadership trainers like Anuttama Prabhu and Braj Bihari Prabhu, Yadunandana Swami, those who hold leadership and management training seminars. What do you do after the training? How this gets translated into daily work of the leader who attended the course, 3-day course or 7-day course, and what is the follow-up? And is there any way to help them implement what they have learned? They have learned wonderful things. In the course, you can learn wonderful things, but then I think after 2 weeks, people just go back to their old ways again.
Yeah, so underneath that systems and structures box, you could say, as you described earlier, a service description. These are your accountabilities. These are your deliverables. These are the standards against which you will be assessed. But that's meaningless unless there is then assessment. There is then holding accountable. What happens if someone badly messes up? Do they get away with it? There should be an annual appraisal. This is how other organizations deal with this, where if someone's in a leadership role and they are incompetent or their performance is unacceptably low, initially there might just be some correction to say, this is how much you must pick up your game before the next assessment period is completed. And if you're continually going to underperform, maybe we need to give the service to someone who can do it. And if you don't have this kind of structure and system, this is what happens. You have people who are potentially underperforming for years. Everybody sees it. Everybody thinks they're just getting away with it. So as you're saying, within a service description, it should also say, these are the skills you need in order to execute. Here's where we're going to give you those skills. But now we actually need to see you applying those skills. You know, is it acceptable, for instance, that a temple doesn't have a strategy? Is that okay? Is it acceptable it just sort of does stuff? Maybe we could say, well, look, as long as the deities are getting their offerings and they're being fed and, you know, they have a morning program, just leave them alone and everything will just happen in due course. But if the goal of the society is to take Krishna consciousness to engage all the peoples of the world, like at what point should the temple be coming up with a plan of how it's going to, beyond its own operations, how it's going to reach out and fulfill that part of the mission? Are we just a confederation of temples? Is that what our strategy is, informally? Or are we still trying to fulfill Prabhupada's purposes, which is to transform the world? Where's that plan? Like, this is probably for our next session. This is where we need to talk about empowerment. Our structure is based around Srila Prabhupada saying he didn't want centralization and he didn't want anyone bossing the temples. So the temples have a large degree of autonomy and independence. The GBC are governance. They're not management, even if we throw around terms like ultimate managerial authority. That was a term used in the will, and it actually has a very particular legal meaning, and we've made a religion out of it. And how do we come up with a collective strategy? It's like, is it only that every temple just does their own thing, every leader just does their own thing, and it adds up to something? Or is it that we should be thinking, how do we collaborate together? I mean, Srila Prabhupada did say, your love for me was shown by how you cooperate together. Organization and intelligence. Are we doing that? Or are we being relatively unorganized and relatively unintelligent? Anyway, so that's probably a good point to leave things for today. We're down to our last couple of minutes. I'm hoping that anyone who does watch this can see that these frameworks potentially provide an interesting lens to look at the, you know, challenges our organization has, and in some ways an enabling lens. It's not just a quagmire of messiness. This is a way of organizing our thought processes and funneling our actions to actually restore effectiveness, or at least gain effectiveness, or whatever, as opposed to somehow just keep existing. And that's the idea. And look, we plan to have more of these. I really want to extend massive thanks to Gita Seva Akuriji for suggesting that we have these sessions. And Virtualista Ghosty has been sitting there sort of dormantly for a few years, but maybe this can be a frequent channel. If you like some of the stuff we've talked about today and want to find out more, ask questions. Like, I'm not expecting that you're fully equipped now to run off and build a community engagement session. There's probably a little bit of a roadmap you would need in terms of how to ask the right questions and create the right mood and listen nicely and stuff like that, if you're going to do them. But yes, we'll probably aim to have these on a fairly regular basis. If you like it and you think it would be useful for others, then share it as well. And let's see if we can actually have Virtualista Ghosty about this important topic of how we are collectively contributing to the direction of Srila Prabhupada's movement. Any final words from you, Akuriji?
I would like in future sessions that we look, for example, we'll look at Srila Prabhupada's instructions for leaders and managers and then discuss them. For example, letter to Karandara for 72 is a very famous letter full of instructions for leaders. Very famous. So we can look at this. And there is letter to Shukadev, there is some to Tejas, letters that he directly sent to those who have taken up leadership and management responsibility, and then to see how these things can be applied today.
I agree. And look, I think we didn't really get into empowerment much. We started to talk about it a little bit at the end, but I think that letter to Karandhar that you're mentioning is a classic example of a leadership style, not controlling, but one that is very much about releasing people to serve according to their inclinations and to exercise, entrepreneurship and so on. The early days of the movement could be characterized by extraordinary entrepreneurship. Every husband and wife was going out and opening a temple in a local place. Imagine if that had continued. Wow. At some point, it seemed like we ended up having a class system where there are some big celebrities that give all the classes and everybody else is somewhat incapable or inactive. They're just consuming those classes rather than empowered to shape the mission and go out there and make it happen and so on. So I think that's a really, really big conversation. That could be our next topic next time. Look, it's 75 minutes. We said we'd let you go. I think you have to do some travel. Thank you so much for this conversation today and even just inspiring the series. Let's share it like mad. Some of these conversations are happening on the Virtualista Ghosty site with some of the posts that are there. And hopefully we'll pick up more viewers in future. Hare Krishna.
Okay, thank you very much, Damodar Prabhu. This was very exciting and looking forward to future sessions.
Hari Bolo.